Hello everyone. This is chapter 25 from my contemporary romance novel Under A Namibian Sky. In this chapter we learn that unfortunately Auntie Elsa's condition has deteriorated dramatically. And that means decisions has to be made that will affect the rest of Luca and Naomi's lives. Are they ready, do you think? Are you ready? The next morning, when Naomi went to meet Luca for their regular early morning swim, the Lapa and surrounding area looked as it usually did. There were no signs of the party from the evening before. Either the staff had worked through the night to clean everything, or they'd used magic. Luca was sitting alone in the Lapa as he waited for Naomi, absorbed in something on his phone. Naomi stood, admiring him for a moment. She couldn't help wondering how he'd managed to look so good so early in the morning. He'd obviously had a shower, as his hair was wet and tousled, which heightened his sexiness. That this amazing, stunning man was hers still felt like a dream. Gratitude coursed through her that they could talk things through and come to a better understanding of each other. She couldn't ask for anything more. Her heart swelled with love for him, for his kindness, his consideration, and for his realness. More than anything, she appreciated how he didn't give up on her, didn't give up on their love, even before either knew for sure how the other was feeling. Just as she was about to say something to him, the sound of the doctor's Cessna flying over the lodge made her look up. Luca did the same and noticed her standing there. He quickly got up and went to her, slipping an arm around her waist. His free hand cupped her cheek as he softly kissed her lips. He let her go, looking deep into her eyes, the sexy smile still lingering around his mouth, his hands warm on her shoulders. "Good morning, amore mio. You brought the sunshine with you. See?" Luca pointed toward the east, where pink ribbons of sunrise floated through the sky as it turned into day. "Sunshine! That's replacing my night of missing you." Naomi smiled at his silly and charming attempt at romance so early in the morning. She hugged his torso, leaned her head on his chest, and gave him a squeeze instead. "Let's get to the kitchen. The doctor will be there. He's most probably brought news about Stefan's autopsy." Together, arms around each other, they walked to the kitchen. The young doctor was standing by the door, ready to knock, when Luca and Naomi came upon him. Naomi thought it odd that he had his doctor's bag in his hand, but realized he might be off somewhere else afterwards where he'd need it. He greeted them, his face suitably serious for the news he had to share, and followed them into the kitchen. The aroma of freshly made coffee met them as soon as the door opened. Staff was already busy preparing refreshments for the sunrise safaris and breakfast in the Lapa for guests who would stay at the lodge. But the doctor didn't stop. He strode to the middle door leading to the corridor that would take him further into the grand old house. A cold hand immediately clamped around Naomi's heart. She glanced at Luca. He took her hand and squeezed it reassuringly as they ran down the corridor to Auntie Elsa's room, overtaking the doctor. When they reached Auntie Elsa's door, the doctor, who'd had to run to keep up with them, held up a hand. He was struggling to catch his breath, but tried to keep his voice a whisper. "Let me examine her first. I'll let you know the moment you can enter." But Naomi couldn't wait. She had to see Auntie Elsa, had to see she was all right, that she was still alive. She pushed past the doctor, but he stopped her from opening the door. "Please, Naomi, I know this is difficult for you, but I promise I'll let you in as soon as I can. Please, just let me help her first." Naomi couldn't speak, but she could see the young doctor was sincere. Her mind was working overtime. What if this was it? What if this was the moment she'd been dreading? She wasn't ready yet to let go of Auntie Elsa, not like this. Luca put his arms around Naomi and hugged her tight against his body as he tried to calm her. The trembling in her body lessened somewhat against Luca's warm, secure chest. She felt protected, but for how long? The doctor's demeanour suggested Auntie Elsa had taken a turn for the worse. Naomi wanted to be strong for her. She fought to get herself under control, refusing to shed the tears that threatened to fall as her throat tightened. After what seemed like an hour, but may have been only minutes, the door opened and the doctor came out. Softly he closed the door behind him. He looked into Naomi's questioning eyes. "It's as expected. This will be a trying time for all of you. Auntie Elsa doesn't have much longer, maybe a few days. I've made her as comfortable as I can and administered as high a dose of morphine as I dare. There's nothing more I can do." Naomi heard his words as though through sand. His muffled sounds meant nothing other than reinforcing the realization that her beloved adoptive mother was leaving her. Luca put an arm around her shoulders and pulled her closer to him to comfort her. The doctor opened the door and gestured for them to enter Auntie Elsa's room. Auntie Elsa sat propped up against her pillows. Her face was drawn and yellow. She was clearly in a great deal of pain. The doctor had inserted a needle into her arm, which allowed the drip to feed fluid and painkillers directly into her bloodstream. He tied the bag with the clear liquid to the nearest post of a four-poster bed above her head, and he'd supplied a catheter so she didn't have to get up out of bed to visit the loo. When Auntie Elsa saw Naomi, she smiled weakly and beckoned her closer. Her voice was a whisper. "Darling, I'm not doing too well, but please don't be sad. I'm ready to go to my voter, and you have Luca." Naomi shook her head to show Auntie Elsa didn't need to talk. She sat down on the bed beside her and took her cold, bony hand in hers. She rubbed her thumb over the back to warm it up, but Auntie Elsa's hand remained cold and clammy. Naomi couldn't trust her voice, so she remained silent, her eyes saying everything she felt instead, telling of her deep love for Auntie Elsa. The two women sat staring at each other, little sad smiles lingering around their lips. There was nothing more to say. Luca and the doctor quietly left the room so Naomi and Auntie Elsa could have some privacy, but neither heard nor saw the men go. After a while, it became clear the painkillers were having some effect on Auntie Elsa. Her breathing slowed and she closed her eyes, her face relaxing as the worst of the pain left her body. Naomi made sure Auntie Elsa was sleeping before she got up from the bed and tiptoed out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. She found Luca and the doctor sitting at the big wooden table in the kitchen, each with a mug of steaming coffee. Both stood up immediately as she walked toward them, question marks in their eyes. "She's sleeping. Thank you for helping her, Doctor. What do we do now?" Luca pulled a chair out for her to sit beside him and signalled Chef to bring her some sweet coffee. The doctor sat back down meanwhile, a frown between his eyes as he formulated his response. "There is little we can do, but we can make sure she is comfortable and as pain-free as possible. I've prepared more drips with the right amounts of painkillers. I'll leave those here with Kerry. She's your first aider, isn't she?" Naomi nodded. The doctor checked his watch. "I've called Kerry. I know it's probably earlier than her normal working hours, but I have another patient to get to, so I can't stay." Just as he finished speaking, Kerry hurried through the door. Red spots blooming on her cheeks showed the effort she'd made to get here as quickly as possible. Naomi listened to the doctor's words as he explained everything to Kerry, but she couldn't take in any of it. Thank God for Kerry, who was immediately alert, taking notes as the doctor spoke, so she wouldn't miss a thing later when it counted. Leaving Kerry with the doctor, Luca and Naomi returned to sit with Auntie Elsa, Naomi's eyes never lifting from her beloved adopted mother's face. Kerry had drawn up a roster meanwhile, so someone would be with Auntie Elsa every moment of the day or night. She knew it would give Naomi enormous peace of mind. Instructions were to call Kerry and Naomi at once should there be any change in Auntie Elsa's condition. Each member of staff on the roster eagerly accepted their turn to sit with Auntie Elsa while they still had the chance to do so. Naomi supplied Auntie Elsa's favourite books in case she wanted to listen to readings from them. Kerry arranged for a small stereo system and Auntie Elsa's favourite music, should she want to hear it. Santina, Luca, and several of Auntie Elsa's friends who'd remained at the lodge following the party insisted on being added to the roster. By the evening, Auntie Elsa, though still in pain, seemed much better again. She was adamant about getting out of bed and joining everyone in the Lapa for dinner, even though she had no appetite. It was a very different affair from the happy one of the previous night, but everyone was grateful to spend one more evening with this incredible lady. Afterward, in a room, Santina stayed with Auntie Elsa, the two friends talking until Auntie Elsa fell asleep. The other guests stayed in the Lapa along with Kerry and Johan, but Luca and Naomi elected to sit in the guest lounge to have their coffee. It was the first time they got to spend time alone together again since the storm in the desert. Luca put down his cup on the coffee table beside him. With a sigh of contentment, he stretched out his long legs in front of him, crossing them at his ankles. Intertwining his fingers behind his head, he leaned back into the cushions behind him. "I've been thinking." Naomi put down her cup. Her heart was lighter than it had been in the morning after finding Auntie Elsa in so much pain. But she knew her feelings of relief wouldn't last long. Still, for now, the heaviness had lifted. She smiled at Luca. "That could be dangerous." "Dangerous, amore? Oh, yes, I see." He returned her smile, but the frown between his dark eyes remained as he thought of the best way to broach the subject with her. He'd wanted to give her the best, but circumstances seemed to conspire against him. None of his carefully laid plans to woo Naomi and to prove to her how much he loved her had transpired according to his wishes. Thankfully, the doubt that she'd accept his proposal had evaporated as they spoke, as they came to understand each other, to know each reciprocated the other's love at such a deep level. Now, he'd have to forego another plan. It was clear Auntie Elsa wouldn't be with them for long. Luca had wanted to give Naomi the opportunity to have Auntie Elsa at their wedding. It was a delicate subject, and the last thing he wanted was to upset Naomi more than current circumstances did. "Nothing about our engagement has quite worked out how I'd imagined." "How do you mean?" "Don't get me wrong, I had planned on asking Auntie Elsa for your hand, but not in the way that it happened. Although, come to think of it, it was a great experience for everyone around us, see?" Naomi nodded, but stayed silent, waiting to see where his thoughts were leading. "And although it was more perfect than I could have engineered, I hadn't planned on proposing to you in a truck, in a storm, in the middle of the desert, amore mio." Luca sat back up and leaned towards Naomi. But now, Naomi's heart beat a little faster. Was he about to propose the same thing she'd been thinking? "With Auntie Elsa so ill," Luca sighed. Why was this so difficult? They were going to get married anyway. What difference did it make that it happened now? Yet he knew it made a difference. They'd only just cleared the air between them. They'd only just got engaged. Neither of them had had time to get used to the idea that their lives would change forever when they said their vows. Was it all too much too soon? How would it affect their future? But now, with Auntie Elsa's imminent death... "How would you like it if we got married tomorrow?" Naomi sat in stunned silence for a moment. Even though having Auntie Elsa at her wedding had been in her thoughts, it was a dream that had been slipping away. "Oh, Luca, do you mean it?" Naomi jumped on him. He laughed at her excitement and caught her in his arms, pulling her down onto his lap. "I do." He kissed her gently. "I thought perhaps we could have our ceremony in the desert, near the place where you took me to see my first African elephant. Do you remember? The big old bull. That's when I first suspected my feelings for you ran deeper than I was prepared to admit." Naomi clasped her hands together in front of her mouth. "That would be perfect. Oh, Luca. But how will we arrange everything so quickly?" She checked the clock over the mantelpiece. "It's already gone 8. He kissed her again. "Don't worry your pretty head, my Naomi. If our ceremony is just before sunset tomorrow, we'd have most of the day to arrange everything. And this way, many of Auntie Elsa's friends, and yours, I presume, are still here to join us." "That will be perfect." But a frown remained between Naomi's eyes even as she said those words. Luca kissed the frown. "But, amore mio, I can feel a but." "Oh no, not a but. I'm just wondering if Auntie Elsa could make it into the desert with us." "Well, the desert was just a thought. We will do whatever works best for her, see? Even if it means we get married in her room. I don't care where, as long as you become my wife and make me the happiest man in the universe. And your Auntie Elsa can be there to see how happy you are." Naomi threw her arms around his neck, kissed him, and pressed his head into her chest. "Oh, Luca, you're the best!" She let go of him and sat back. The frown was back between her eyes. "But what about your father? Wouldn't you want him at your wedding?" "I spoke to him earlier today and mentioned how ill Auntie Elsa was. He said he wanted to meet the woman who'd raised the girl I want to marry. So he's already made arrangements. He should be here tomorrow morning." Naomi got up. "Oh, but..." Luca pulled her back down beside him and gave her another soft kiss on her lips. "Don't worry, amore mio. Kerry has already taken care of everything for him. You're right. She's a fantastic manager." Later that night, alone in her bed, Naomi suddenly thought about a dress. What was she going to wear? A wedding dress was a huge deal, wasn't it? But even as her mind whirled with the events of the last few days and the thoughts of what was to come in the days ahead, an idea for the perfect dress popped in there somehow. Auntie Elsa, who looked so much better despite a yellow tint still on her skin, was already sitting propped up against her pillows when Naomi entered her room early the next morning. After the staff member who'd stayed with her all night had left the room, Naomi checked that Auntie Elsa had had a good night's sleep. Naomi sat down on the bed beside her and held her small, thin hand. It felt warmer than the day before, at least. Naomi was grateful for that. "I have something to ask. 2 things, actually." Auntie Elsa smiled at her daughter, her eyes already consenting to whatever Naomi wanted. Naomi had discussed with Luca the evening before that she be the one to invite Auntie Elsa to their wedding. "How would you like to be the guest of honor at my wedding today?" Auntie Elsa's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean?" Naomi couldn't contain the huge smile that burst forth from her heart. "Yes, Luca wants us to marry today. We'd love it if you could be there. Would you?" A frown appeared on Naomi's face as her smile faded, doubt naked in her eyes. "Could you?" "Oh, my darling girl, I'm so happy for you. Of course I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Where were you thinking?" Naomi quickly outlined the plan, and Auntie Elsa's eyes glittered more and more with excitement as Naomi filled in the details. Auntie Elsa was nodding, tears shining in her eyes. Like Naomi, she hadn't thought she'd live to see her darling daughter getting married. Now she could leave this world with even more happiness in her heart. She smiled at Naomi. "And the second request?" "Your wedding dress." Auntie Elsa clapped her hands together in front of her mouth. The tears she'd been holding on travelled down her cheeks. "Oh, Naomi, that would be so wonderful. Of course, you must have it. If it brings you as much joy and love as it has Votra and me, I couldn't be happier. You couldn't ask for anything more." Auntie Elsa directed Naomi to where the dress was kept in tissue paper, in a suitcase at the back of her huge wardrobe carved from acacia wood. Reverently, Naomi removed it and tried it on. As Naomi was so much taller than Auntie Elsa, the dress fell much shorter on her, but it was a perfect fit. She twirled around. The cream silk dress hugged her curves and felt as soft as a breeze against her skin. She took it off again and was just about to return it to the tissue paper and the suitcase that had kept it safe for so many years, when she noticed a full lace veil beneath the next layer of tissue paper. It was much longer than the dress, clearly meant to train behind it. But again, because of Naomi's taller stature, the veil fell to her ankles. It was perfect. She kissed Auntie Elsa and turned to leave just as Santina opened the door. It was her turn next to sit with Auntie Elsa. Luca had already informed Santina of their plans, and she hugged Naomi tightly. "I'm so happy for you both, Naomi. Luca deserves so much happiness, and having got to know you a little, I'd say so do you." The morning was a hive of activity. Everyone seemed to have something to do, and was on a mission to fulfill their duty. Naomi felt strangely detached from it all, as though she had no part in any of it. She couldn't stay away from Auntie Elsa's room for long, and popped in every 15 minutes to check she was all right. Luca's father arrived under a cloud of sand as his pilot drove the small plane closer to the lodge. Naomi went with Luca and Santina to meet him. He wasn't how Naomi had imagined him to be. He was tall like Luca, but had a much more serious, much sterner demeanour. When he spoke, his voice was a soft tenor, however, which sounded friendlier than he appeared. His smart clothes and grey hair gave him a distinguished air. The moment he stepped off the plane, Enzo, which he insisted everyone call him, congratulated Luca and Naomi on their wedding. He didn't have Luca's natural charm and warm manner, but Naomi could see he was happy for them both. He held her hand as the small party walked to his suite, Luca carrying his father's bags. Once he'd settled in, Enzo asked after Auntie Elsa. As Auntie Elsa was feeling so much better, no doubt her spirits lifted by the excitement of the wedding, she'd asked to be wheeled out to the Lapa. One of the regular morning nurses who'd checked on Auntie Elsa helped to disconnect her from the IV to make her more mobile before helping her into the wheelchair and pushing her there. The sun reflected off the water in the pool, generating light and shade in waves on the buildings surrounding it. Lush green plants and tiny birds helped to create a carefree vacation atmosphere. Naomi could see how Auntie Elsa would find it more restful out here than staying cooped up in her bedroom all day, even though the room was huge and stylish. Enzo was gentle with Auntie Elsa. He sat with her, holding her hand while they whispered together and drank coffee. Meanwhile, Santina, Kerry and Johan had flown to Windhoek with Luca. Luca to find wedding bands, the others to look for something to wear to the wedding. Chef and his team were preparing party food. Outa Jan had commandeered several guards, gardeners and waiters to help set up the venue in the desert. Other staff members were cleaning the safari trucks that were to take everyone to the site for the wedding. Although everyone was busy, it wasn't frenetic. Instead, the activity around Naomi filled her with a sense of peace. She spent time alone in her room, but wanted to spend as much time with Auntie Elsa as she could. She took her things with her and gave them both manicures and pedicures, pampering herself and Auntie Elsa. The two women didn't have to talk, and much of the pampering happened in silence, as each was busy with their thoughts. Soon Naomi would be Mrs. Luca Armati. It sounded surreal to her ears, and she couldn't help but be anxious about what the future held in store for her, especially with a title like that. What would he expect of her? Would she be able to fit into Luca's world the way he'd fitted into hers so easily? She shook her head. It was best to deal with one thing at a time, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She didn't want to dwell on things that made her feel anything other than happy. All she could think of was how grateful she was Auntie Elsa was still here to witness her wedding. She felt truly blessed. In the meantime, Chef had prepared a barbecue for lunch. Luca and his entourage had returned to the lodge, hungry and tired, carrying an array of shopping bags. As a result, lunch was a subdued affair, and when they'd eaten their fill, everyone went to their rooms for a short siesta. But Naomi couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were with Auntie Elsa and with Luca. Luca couldn't sleep either. He was lying on his bed with his eyes closed, but his mind refused to switch off. How was he going to help Naomi when Auntie Elsa died? Although she'd attempted to be with them, it shocked him to see Auntie Elsa's rapid deterioration. The doctor was right. Her time seemed to go imminently closer. Luca felt comforted by the thought that the doctor would be in attendance. God forbid anything should happen today. It would forever mar their wedding anniversary. He just wanted it to be the perfect day for them all. Sharing this special moment together meant everything to both Auntie Elsa and Naomi, he knew. Supporting his bride as much as he could when the time came for Auntie Elsa to leave was his main concern, however. A sigh escaped his lips. He rolled onto his side. He didn't want to be thinking thoughts of Auntie Elsa leaving. Thoughts of happiness should occupy his mind now. The joy that he's marrying the woman of his dreams. Feelings of being with her, being together, sharing a life. That's what should be on his mind instead. He got up. Thinking some exercise might clear his head, he pulled on his swimming trunks and headed to the pool. To his surprise, Naomi was already there, swimming serious lengths. They were more alike than he'd imagined. A smile curled around his mouth as he watched her touch on the side of the pool. She wouldn't be able to miss him as he remained standing there. Green eyes looked up at him. "Hi! What are you doing here? I thought you were sleeping." "I could well ask the same of you, amore mio." "I needed some exercise." "Me too." He dived over her head into the pool and swam in the opposite direction, knowing she'd follow him. In the next chapter, we're invited to Luca and Naomi's spur-of-the-moment wedding that takes place in the Namibian desert. So it's a wedding with a difference, but are they ready for it? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and sharing my videos. And most of all, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. Until next time.